Since their introduction in Terraria 1.3, it's always been disputed which out of two optional pillar weapons a player should choose, with no-brain choices like the Stardust Dragon over the Cell Staff, and some more tricky decisions like the Vortex Beta or Phantasm. Today follows this trend, with both solar weapons we're going to be looking at seriously matching closely in terms of pros and cons. Of course, I'm talking about the Solar Eruption Whipping Sword and Daybreak Throwable Spear. Now, although these weapons do come during a very thin slice of progression, their importance is unmatched, as for you melee players, one of these beaters might just be the thing that gets you that long-awaited Moonlord kill. Before we do begin though, here's something bananas. Around 80% of you beautiful people aren't actually subbed to the channel, so if you enjoy these vids, why not let YouTube know, as it really helps out. Okay, let's jump into this. As you know, the pillars come at a time in the game where you're probably already pretty busted, with the cultist fight being the first challenge you'll face to obtain them. Which, let's all be honest, as long as you've kept up with only even post-Plantera progression, shouldn't be too tricky, with even a less than ideal Scourge of the Corruptor taking it down. Now, afterwards, this is the part that really matters, because assuming you are set up for melee, you're going to want to head straight to that solar pillar to get your fragments, as there's no point doing other pillars with your outdated gear. And luckily, although many deem the solar pillar as the hardest, as long as you stay low to the ground, it's actually really simple, and I was able to complete it flawlessly using the Terrablade. Right, once you've got your fragments in hand, you've been given more than enough to craft both your Solar Eruption and Daybreak at an Ancient Manipulator. So the true question is, which one do you use going forward? And unfortunately, this isn't a one-line answer, so let's take a good look at how these things perform. With the way pillar progression is, your damage output will considerably jump no matter what by switching to these things. However, to get the most out of them, you want to be using them in the right scenarios. You see, the Solar Eruption, for instance, fires an explosive launched flail with limited range, meaning the closer you are to your target, the higher your DPS will be, which, while can equate to an impressive 1500 up close, becomes less than ideal just 30 tiles away. So what about the Daybreak? Well, aside from having a more ranged weapon-focused functionality, its damage does appear as slightly less on this single target. But, as you can see, this weapon delivers a secondary attack in form of an explosion, doubling its damage. But going back to the Solar Eruption though, one undeniable perk of this weapon is its ability to phase through tiles, opening up a whole host of close quarter scenarios which wouldn't be possible with the Daybreak. Also, from a passive damage perspective, the explosions caused by this weapon inflict the unique Daybroken debuff, which deals an additional 100 damage per second, which although sounds great, it's worth noting that the Daybreak takes this to the next level, with the same debuff being able to be stacked up to 8 times, resulting in an additional 800 DPS, which can't be seen on this test. Absolute madness. So, with that in mind, I think it's pretty clear what's going to be good at what, with the Solar Eruption's Infinite Piercing being able to demolish the multi-target test, and on the Daybreak side of things, it's a little more underwhelming, with no piercing in sight causing its damage to only really increase from the AoE explosions. But you know, against the real thing, the tables are about to turn again. You see, although the Solar Eruption is of course capable at taking out tanky single targets, it's not even remotely close to what the Daybreak can do, taking out this ogre at blisteringly fast speeds. But again, if I were to focus on large, less tanky groups, the Solar Eruption excels in dealing damage to multiple enemies at a time, compared to the Daybreak's more linear approach. So what does this all mean? Well, for starters, I think it's pretty clear that the Daybreak's going to be your boss killer going forward, with it being able to get those pillars started back up for you super fast. However though, switching it up again, for the actual pillars themselves, the Solar Eruption will do you splendidly, with its multi-target block phasing power truly being the ultimate pre-Moonlord melee option for those enemies, so I'd stick to that for this part. But of course, what really it all comes down to is the Moonlord. And I have to say, unless you're doing some weird stationary box strategy with immunity frames, which if I'm honest, doesn't even seem to be working anymore, you 110% want to be going with the Daybreak for this fight, as not only does it give you a usable amount of range to fight this boss, but also a stupendous amount of damage, which is probably thanks to all the spears stacking and exploding when he closes an eye. I guess though, if you really wanted, you could at the very least use the Eruption for dealing with the heart, but honestly, if you hit your shots, the Daybreak will be quicker. Okay, with the Moonlord down, I think it's worth us considering potentially overuses for these weapons, as it's a shame to see them go so fast. And really, as suggested earlier, I'd use the Eruption to clear any last events and invasions you need completing, and conversely, the Daybreak for a leftover boss. You know, I've always really loved how well thought out these melee weapons are, so hopefully you'll be able to get the most out of them in your next playthrough. This has been sockrteez, and I'll see you in the next one.